We are moving on to our last unit of the year, hooray, and this is going to be on probability. So this week what we're going to do is we're just going to do some basics on probability, what it means, and then we'll go into experimental probability. It's basically just dividing some numbers. Next week we will get into independent events, and then the week after we will get to dependent events. And then that very last week you'll have a summative and you are done with this crazy school year. So we are getting started with probability, and the definition of probability is it's just the chance of something happening. It could be a really small chance. It could be a really high chance, but we have to put a numerical value to that probability of something happening. And we can sometimes have these written as fractions. Sometimes they are written as decimals. And sometimes they are written as percents, and we need to be able to interchange between them. So first things first, a probability must be between the numbers 0 and 1. Oh, sorry, 0 and 1. And what that means is 0% up to 100%. So if something has a probability of 1, it is a 100% chance, it's guaranteed that it's going to happen. So it must fall between 0 and 1. If you get a probability of something like 0.4, that would mean it has a 40% chance of happening. So as long as this decimal is somewhere between 0 and 1, you have a valid probability. So let's go ahead and look at a couple different numbers and see if those are valid, realistic probabilities. So this number 2.5, is that between 0 and 1? No, it's not. This number 13/2, it's written as a fraction. If you try something 2 times, is it possible that it happens 13 of them? No. If you were to divide this, it would be 6.5, and that is definitely not between 0 and 1. So 13/2 is not a valid probability. If you had 2/13, that would work, but 13/2 doesn't work. 14%, is that between 0% and 100%? Yes, it is. It's not a great probability, but it'll happen maybe like 1 in 7 times or so. We get -78%. Now 78% is valid. It's between 0 and 100%. But you have that negative sign in front. You can never have a negative probability. The chance of something happening can never be negative. If you go on the news and look at the weather reports, they don't tell you there's a negative chance of rain. So negatives, can't have those for probability. For 0.65, is that a decimal between 0 and 1? It sure is. This would represent a 65% chance of something happening. The next one, 3 out of 100. If you try something 100 times, could it happen 3 of them? Sure. That means 3%, but that would be a valid probability. So as long as that bottom number in the fraction is bigger than the top, then you're good to go. And the last one, 0.02%. Is it between 0 and 1? It is, all between 0 and 100%. Yes, it is. This is a really small probability, but it's still a valid probability. Go ahead and pause the video now and try this next row on your own. When you are done, come on back and we will look at some vocab words with probability. All right, what we're going to do now is we're going to take these words or phrases and we are going to put them on the number line below. So just to start on this number line, the smallest probability you could have is 0%. That's a decimal of 0. And the highest probability you have, if you go all the way over to the right, is 100%. That would be a decimal of 1. And in the middle, we're going to put right about here. I'm going to put that as 50%. So now if I'm looking at all of these words, I want to rank them from the lowest probability to the highest probability. So I have the word certain, if something is certain to happen, if something's unlikely to happen, it's likely, it's equally likely, and it's impossible. That word impossible is the smallest chance, so I'm going to put a 1 there. So over here at 0%, I'm going to put it is impossible. Now, of these phrases, I'm going to start with the highest probability. I'm going to put a 5 on the one that's highest. So that word certain, if something is certain to happen, that means it's guaranteed to happen. It's going to happen no matter what. That's going to be my 5. So way at the right, something with a 100% chance of happening is it is certain to happen. It is a guarantee. There are no exceptions. It will happen 100% of the time. Now I'm going to jump to number 3 because I think that one's the next easiest one to do. That phrase, equally likely, that's going to be 50%. So at 50%, I'm going to put equally likely. So if something is equally likely, there's the same chance that it happens that it does not happen. So you could think of like flipping a coin. You've got a 50-50 chance of flipping that coin, and it could either be heads or tails. It's 50-50, it's equally likely. So there's a 50% chance. That was my number 3. Now we have 2 other words here, unlikely or likely. If something is unlikely to happen, it's not going to happen as much. So that would be anything between this range of values here. So this would be considered unlikely. It's not going to happen as much. So this one I'm going to put my 2 there. And if something's bigger than 50% but smaller than 100%, that means it is likely to happen. You know, if the weather report says you've got a 90% chance of rain, it's likely to rain. So unlikely, probably not going to happen. Likely means more often that it will happen. What does it mean if something has a probability of, oops, let's put a 4 there. What does it mean if something has a probability of 0? Well, if you look over here at 0, we said that is impossible. That means it has no chance of happening. So there is no chance of happening. So in your mind, try and think of things that there is no chance of happening. What's the chance that it will literally rain cats and dogs? Like you will have cats and dogs pouring down from the sky. That does not have a chance of happening. What does it mean if it has a probability of 1? Now remember, 1 does not mean 1%. That means 100%. So this means it is guaranteed to happen. If something is guaranteed to happen, it has a probability of 1. There are no exceptions. It is guaranteed to happen. And lastly, what does it mean if something has a probability of 0.5? Remember, 0.5 as a percentage is 50%. What that means is it's basically a coin flip. It's equally likely that it happens or doesn't happen. So I'm going to say it's a 50-50 chance. Screen went out on me. There's my screen. That phrase 50-50 chance is because there's a 50% chance that it happens and a 50% chance that it does not happen. So for your assignment, you are just going to take all of these scenarios here and you are going to put an X somewhere on this number line as to where you think it's going to be. Try and make an educated guess and then write the percentage on there. So I'll do the first scenario with you. The probability that your first child will be a female. Well, they're pretty close to 50-50. I think there's some studies out there that say male or female, one is more likely than the other. But I'm going to put an X right there at 50%, and I'm going to say 50%. It might actually be like 49.2% or something like that. You can do the research. But go ahead and do the rest of the scenarios. And when you are all done, go ahead and submit that for the first assignment this week.